This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hi, Parshas Kedoshim. We have a very interesting mitzvah in this week's Parsha, but we begin by talking about something very mysterious in Parshas Vayetze, and that is Yaakov Avinu is looking for his shidduch, and he comes to his family's native land. He comes to Haran, and he meets a bunch of shepherds, and the pasuk tells us, Vayomer lahem Yaakov. Yaakov says to them, Achai, my brothers, me'ayin atem, where are you from? Vayomru, and they said, Mecharan anachnu, we are from Haran. Address Haran. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky points out that there is one word in this pasuk that stands before his eyes always, and it's inexplicable. We cannot explain it. And that is, which word is out of place? Which word doesn't belong there? Achai, my brothers. Yaakov Avinu is meeting people he has never met before. He doesn't know them from a hole in the wall. Why would he call them brothers? Okay, this is not the hood. Yaakov Avinu, why would he refer to these individuals as brothers? He doesn't know them. They're not related. For all Yaakov Avinu knows, they could be, who knows what? Criminals, terrorists. Why is Yaakov Avinu calling them brothers? In fact, this is the only place in Chumash, really, where you have two people talking to each other. They're complete strangers, and one guy calls the next guy brother. We know Lot in Sodom, when the people were, banging down the doors, let us in, get those guests out. So Lot says, Achai al not hareu, my brothers, don't harm them. But there, at least, they were people of the same city. Lot knew exactly who they were. So at least, they have some relationship. Lot could call them brothers. But here, Yaakov Avinu is speaking to complete strangers. And we know in Parshas Chukas, when Klal Yisrael was about to enter Eretz Yisrael, and they're passing through the land of Edom, and Moshe Rabbeinu sends the following message to Edom. Koi amar achicha Yisrael. So says your brother, Klal Yisrael. And all the Mefarshim jump on that. Why are we telling Edom we're brothers with them? And all the Mefarshim go to town to try to explain what Klal Yisrael meant by referring to themselves as brothers. And yet, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, when it comes to this word brother, in Parshas Vayetze, nobody's bothered. Everybody just reads the pasuk, the Balkai reads, and weiter, nobody gives it a second thought. Why is Yaakov referring to these complete strangers as brothers? Okay. There's a very interesting mitzvah in this week's Parsha, and that is the mitzvah of Teichacha. Right? The mitzvah of Teichacha is, you see somebody, he's eating a cheeseburger from McDonald's. So, right, the mitzvah in Torah is, you got to tell him, hey sir, cut it out. What if he's about to eat, what is he about to eat it? You got to stop him from eating it. Fine. Question. Before you take a little of an esrog, you make a bracha. Before you sit in the sukkah, you make a bracha. Before you put on tefillin, you make a bracha. So here the guy is, he's about to eat the cheeseburger. You say, wait! Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedushaanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu, l'haichiach es am Yisrael. Why don't you make the bracha? Why don't you make a bracha? Why not? You make kiddush on Shabbos, you make a bracha on matzah, you make a bracha when you put on your talis. Why don't you make a bracha when you give teichacha? It's a good question. To what extent do you have to give musar to somebody? In other words, let's say he's going to attack you. Let's say he's going to curse you. Let's say he's going to be insulted. Until what point is a person obligated to give teichacha? So the Gemara in Erechin tells us, number 4 on your sheets, on Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, ad heichan teichacha. Until what point is someone obligated to give musar? Rav Amar ad haka. Rav says, you got to tell the guy what he's doing wrong until he's going to punch you in the face. Up until that point. Ad v'loy ad b'chlal. If the guy is just going to, hit you lightly, until he's going to mamish punch you, you have to give him musar. Okay? Shmuel says, no, don't be so fanatical. Ad klala, until he's going to curse you out. You don't have to wait until he's mamish going to punch you. If he's about to curse you, you could stop. Rabbi Yochanan said, ad nazifa, until the guy is going to be disgusted with you. You don't have to wait until he hits you. You don't have to wait until he curses you. If you keep on telling him, you Russia, you no goodnik, you this, and he's going to be disgusted with you, that's when you could stop. And the Gemara goes on to say that this machlokes Amoraim is really machlokes Tanoim. Rebbe Lezer says until he's going to hit you. Rabbi Shua says until he's going to curse you. Ben Azai says until he's going to become disgusted with you. And the Gemara says all three opinions derive their respective shitos from the same source. Because we know there was once upon a time there was a man named Yonasan. Yonasan was good friends with David HaMelech. And Yonasan did not like the fact that his father Shaul was giving David a hard time. So Yonasan gives some musar to Shaul. And the pasuk says Shaul was about to hit him. Shaul cursed him. Shaul was upset with him. And from the fact that the Torah, the Tanakh, mentions these three things, we learn out from there, respectively, you give musar until your friend is going to curse you, until he's going to hit you, until he's disgusted with you. Asks Rabbi Kamenetsky, there is no other mitzvah in the Torah that there are exemptions for. For instance, let's say, we tell a guy, put on tefillin. He says, put on tefillin? I have a guy in my shul, if I put on tefillin, he's going to punch me in the face. I can't put on tefillin. So is this person exempt from wearing tefillin because his friend is going to punch him? Or let's say you have a guy that says, talis? My next door neighbor, if he sees me putting on a talis, he's going to curse me. So you're exempt from wearing a talis? That's the other guy's problem. If he doesn't like you wearing a talis, you're not exempt because he's not going to like you. There are no exemptions for any mitzvah because someone's going to hit you, someone's going to curse you, someone's going to be upset at you. So why, when it comes to the mitzvah of rebuke, all of a sudden we say, the mitzvah is not so far-reaching. It only goes up to a point. Once it reaches a certain point, you're exempt. Why are you exempt? You're not exempt from learning because your friend doesn't like it, right? Imagine, I can't learn, it makes my neighbor upset at me. He's going to start cursing me. Who cares? That's his problem. Why, when it comes to the mitzvah of teichacha, do we say up to a certain point? Okay. Another question. The Gemara tells us, what if, you see a guy in shul, and, during Chazaras Hashatz, couldn't imagine such a thing. The guy actually talks. Right? We don't know of such things over here. Baruch Hashem, it's very quiet. But they say that in some shuls, I don't know, maybe that doesn't even exist anymore. But in some shuls, sometimes people forget and they say a word during Shmon Esrei, during Chazar Hashatz. So what's the halacha? Midairaisa, you have the biblical obligation to tell the guy, don't talk. Are you allowed to embarrass the guy? Are you allowed to get up and stand up on your chair and say, you shagets, you Russia? So, the Gemara says like this, if it's going to shame him, if it's going to embarrass him, if his face is going to turn white, you're exempt from the mitzvah. Right? The Gemara says in Erechin, look at number 8, that the Gemara says, why does the pasuk end? V'loisisa olav chet? To teach me that if his face changes colors, you don't do the mitzvah. Ask Rabbi Kamenetsky, why not? Who cares if his face changes colors? You have a mitzvah d'oraisa of teichacha. You got to give him rebuke. So fine, I'll be violating the lav of loisisa olav chet. What do you do if a mitzvah aseh and a mitzvah lois aseh come together at the same time? Aseh, doichel lois aseh. We know. If tzitzis are shatnez, you could wear them. A kohen gadol could wear his big day kahuna, even though it's shatnez. We know if somebody dies without children, their brother will marry the deceased wife. That's called yibum. Aseh doichel lois aseh. So if there's a concept of aseh doichel lois aseh, who cares if my rebuke is going to embarrass the guy? The guy's going to turn white like a ghost. Aseh doichel lois aseh. Why doesn't the mitzvah aseh push away the lav? Okay. Says Rabbi Kamenetsky something very important. If we were to ask ourselves, how do we understand the mitzvah of rebuke? Here you have a guy, I'm walking by his house, he's mowing his lawn on Shabbos. So I have a mitzvah to explain to him that he's doing something wrong. Why? So we probably always viewed it as God told us not to desecrate Shabbos, so we have to keep Shabbos ourselves. We can't use electricity, we can't write. But that also means we're responsible to make sure that other people keep God's mitzvos. So tochacha is like you're God's policeman. You're like Shomerim patrol. The same way you have to keep mitzvos, we have to make sure other people keep mitzvos. Why? It's our responsibility toward God. Says Rabbi Kamenetsky, there could be nothing further from the truth. God doesn't need policemen. God doesn't need, Secret Service. He doesn't need officers. He doesn't need, undercover cops. God could take care of his own business. We have no mitzvah to stand up and make sure other people are doing the right thing because that's our responsibility to Hashem. No. You know why we have a mitzvah of teichacha? Take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam says, in number 6, the Rambam Hilchos Deos, Perek Vav, Halacha Zayin. HaMoichiach on the second line as Chaveroi bein midvarim shbeino lebeinoi bein midvarim shbeino lebein hamakam. You see someone doing something wrong, whether it's interpersonal, whether it's between him and God. Tzarich lahoichichoi beinoi lebein atzma. You have to rebuke him privately. Biyedaber loi benachas. You need to speak to him gently. Uvelashon raka, softly. Biyoidia, you have to let him know. She'enoi oimer loi elo l'toivasi. You got to tell the guy, I'm doing this not for me. Not for my benefit. I don't care. You keep Shabbos, you don't keep Shabbos. It doesn't help me, it doesn't harm me. I'm doing it for you. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to give you Olam Haba. Says the Rambam, you know what Teichacha looks like? Imagine you have a guy, he's starving. Yeah, he's starving. And he's wallowing. He's languishing on the street corner. And you bring him a piece of bread. So what would you do? You poor guy, you lazy bum, here, take the bread. Nobody would do that. You go over very compassionately, very mercifully, and you give him the bread in a way that he recognizes that you're trying to help him out. You know what Teichacha is, says the Rambam? Teichacha is tzedakah. It's gemilas chasadim. You're giving the guy the greatest gift possible. Teichacha is not your God's policeman. Teichacha is not his secret service. You're his agent, you're his cop. God doesn't need that. Teichacha is tzedakah. And if by you giving him teichacha, you're going to shame him, the guy doesn't think you're trying to help him. The guy thinks you're trying to hurt him. That's not the mitzvah. You didn't do anything. You didn't give tzedakah. You didn't help him. Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, teichacha, if we were to, before we walked in here this evening, if I were to ask you, teichacha, is it bein adam l'chaveroi or bein adam l'makoim? I think most of us would have said, it's a mitzvah, bein adam l'makoim. It's our responsibility to God. Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, no, it's not bein adam l'makoim. It's a mitzvah, bein adam l'chaveroi. The same way if a guy needs a dinner, he needs something to eat, you feed him. Same way if a guy is sick, you visit him in the hospital. The same way if somebody needs a buck, you lend him the buck. So to a guy, he has every physical pleasure in the world, but his life is empty. Or even if he does mitzvahs, he's missing one mitzvah, so he's empty from that mitzvah. The greatest gift you could give him, better than giving him your credit card, is teach him how to do the mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of chesed, it's not bein adam l'makom. Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, you know why? If by giving someone teichacha, you're going to embarrass him. You know why? If you're going to embarrass your friend, you don't give teichacha? Not because embarrassing is so strict. No, we would say aseh doichalois aseh. It's because if you're going to embarrass your friend, that's not a chesed. That's not teichacha. That doesn't have the tzura. It doesn't have the image. It doesn't have the picture of gemilas chasadim. So we're learning a very important idea. Teichacha is not bein adam la'makoim. It's bein adam la'chaveroi. It's an interpersonal mitzvah. That is why, very interesting. You know, if you look at where the mitzvah of teichacha is positioned in the Torah, you look back at number 7. It says, it doesn't say eat matzah, sit in the sukkah, wear tefillin, give rebuke, put on your talis. It's not positioned among mitzvahs ben adam al-makam. It says don't hate your friend in your heart, rebuke him, don't take revenge. V'yahavta l'reacha kamaycha. Look carefully where the mitzvah of teichacha is positioned. It's not positioned among mitzvahs ben adam al-makam. It has nothing to do with you and God. It's about, do you feel for your friend? And if you're giving teichacha because it makes you feel good to be the guy to tell this yid over here that you do things better than him, don't say anything, because that's not teichacha. You're not doing him a favor. Teichacha is chesed. Teichacha is chesed. And that is why, if you look in the footnote on the Emes Yaakov, he answers a very interesting stira. We know, if I were to ask you, why was the second Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Sinas chinam, baseless hatred. That's what the Gemara says in Yuma, Daf Tes. But if you look in Shabbos on Daf Kuf Yud Tes, the Gemara says something else entirely. The Gemara says, you know why the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed? Because they didn't rebuke each other. Sounds like a contradiction. One Gemara says because they hated each other. One Gemara says because they didn't rebuke each other. Says Rabbi Yaakov, it's the same thing. Of course they rebuked each other. But if you rebuke your friend because you hate him, it's not rebuke. It's stam. You're antagonizing him. You're instigating him. It's haknata. You're just getting on his nerves. You're just aggravating him. You're annoying him. The definition of teichacha, if you look at number 14, says Rabbi Yerucham, is it's based on the next commandment of Yahavta l'reacha kamaycha. There's a connection. There's a connection between Yahavta l'reacha kamaycha and hoicheach teichiach es hamasecha. If you see a guy mowing his lawn on Shabbos, and you start throwing stones at him because you don't like him, you don't like the fact that he's not doing what you're doing, keep your mouth closed. That's not teichacha. It's not rebuke. That's not rebuke. The definition of teichacha is tzedakah. It's chesed. It's chesed. And Rabbi Sai, we find this concept already in the Rishonim. You look in the Sfarno, number 12 and number 13. Sfarno tells us about Chanoich. It says, Vayishalech Chanoich es Elokim. Chanoich walked with God. Walked with God. What does it mean to walk with God? They went on spaziers together. They went on a stroll, you know. What does it mean Chanoich walked with God? Says the Sfarno, Hishalech bidrachav. He walked in the ways of Hashem. Leheitiv lizulasai. To do good to his neighbor. Bitzdaka, with charity. V'teichachas. And rebuke. Same thing, says the Sfarno. Charity and rebuke, it's the same type of mitzvah. Same type of mitzvah. You have to, if you're about to give rebuke, think to yourself, am I doing something that parallels tzedakah? If your form of rebuke is not like tzedakah, then you need to rethink how the teichacha is being given. Sfarno says the same thing by Noach. By Es Holikim Esalech Noach says the Sfarno, Holach bedrachav lehetiv lezulasai v'haichiach b'nei dairoi. And then the Sfarno adds, by the way, you know who else says this? Berusi HaKaldai. Good old Bruce the Chaldean. Anyone who know who that is? Bruce the Chaldean was a 3rd century BCE historian who used to read hieroglyphics. And he would read the Mesopotamian hieroglyphics. And what it said on the Mesopotamian hieroglyphics was that there was a Mabel. And the Sfarno is quoting over this early 3rd century BCE historian. Okay, just in case you're wondering. Anyway, what we're learning is, Rabbi Sai, that the mitzvah of teichacha is a mitzvah bein adam lachaveroi. And now we have a very simple answer. Why you don't make a bracha on the mitzvah of teichacha? Why don't you make a bracha? Because you don't make a bracha on any mitzvah bein adam lachaveroi. The Rambam says in Hilchos Brachos number 16, you only make a bracha on bein adam lamalkoim. Right? Anyone ever make a bracha when they give tzedakah? Anyone ever make a bracha when they do bikkur cholim? Anyone ever make a bracha when they do hachnasas orchim? Right? You invite a guy to your house. Oh, wait a second, before you eat the fish. Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu, right? Nobody makes a bracha on bein adam lachaveroi. That is another important reason why you don't make a bracha on teichacha. Teichacha is not bein adam lamakoim, it's bein adam lachaveroi. And now I'm going to tell you something that's, knock your socks off. Right? If I were to, so keep your shoes on. If I were to ask you, let's say, you're in a shul, and for 30 years, the guy next to you, he whispers to his friend during Kaddish. And you never said anything. And then you realize, you know what? I really should have told him something. So you do tshuva on Yom Kippur, you say, Al Chet, Shechatan Banecha. Then you realize, do I have to ask the guy for Mechila? Say, Mechila? For not saying something, I have to ask him for Mechila? Why would I have to ask him for Mechila? It's between me and God. So if you would have asked me a week ago, do you have to ask someone for mechila for not reprimanding them? I'd say, sounds ridiculous. What kind of question is that? So the question was written to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. If someone does not reprimand their friend, do you have to ask them for mechila? Look at number 17. Reb Chaim said, Yesh b'zeh makom l'stapek. It's a suffix. It's a suffix whether you have to ask him for mechila. I would say you might have to. Because if you look at number 18, this is some biographical sketches of Rabbi Glatstein. Famous story, Rabbi Glatstein, when he was a Rav in Stachin, and when he took leave of his Kehila, so he said, the minhag is that when you take leave of someone, you ask them for mechila. So he said, I have something to ask you for mechila about. He got up from the podium, and he said, Morav Rabbi Sai, I ask you for mechila for allowing the city to open up a tarba school, a reform school. And even though I know there's nothing I could have said that would have helped, what I should have done was I should have gotten down on the floor, laid down across the threshold of the building, until you saw that the school would not be open until you trample me. And Rabbi Glatstein, I bade mechila to the kehila for not having been meichiach you. So you read the story, it sounds like he's just trying to be dramatic. He's trying to be, get his point across in a very strong way. No, what we're learning is, if you don't reprimand someone, you owe them something. You did an avla to them. You sinned against them. The same way, if you hurt someone's feelings, you owe them something. If you don't give someone a loan, and then, you realize you should have lent him the money, you got to ask him for mechila. The same way, if you could have done a chesed to someone, you don't, you got to ask him for mechila. If you could have given someone musar at the right time, and you don't, now you got to think, maybe I have to ask him for mechila. That's a little bit of a different perspective than we're probably used to. So again, what we're learning is, Rabbi say, toichacha is a mitzvah of ahava. It's a mitzvah of chesed. It's a mitzvah ben adam lachaveroi. You don't make a bracha. Okay. Now let's learn something a little further. Now we know there's a mitzvah of toichacha. But me, toichacha, come on. You got to be kidding me. I'm going to tell the guy sitting next to me in shul not to talk by davening. I have a guy, my neighbor, he's mowing his lawn on Shabbos. Well, I'm going to tell him something, it's America. Mind your own business. Live and let live. I do my thing, he does his thing. Everybody's a free country. Don't say anything, Don't disturb the peace. Free rights, free society, freedom of, right? What does the Rambam say about that? Look in the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, Mitzvah Reisheh. The Rambam says, on the third line, Ein roi lanu sheyomer echad mimenu. No one should say, Ani lo echta. I'm not mowing the lawn on Shabbos. I'm not talking about Kaddish. I would never say a word. I don't even talk in shul. If somebody comes to me, even during Adon Olam, I don't even look at him. But the guy next to me, that's his problem. Says the Rambam, Lo yechta, I'm not sinning. V'im yechta zulasi mali. And if he sins, it's not my problem. Dinayim alikav, he'll take it up with God. Live and let live. Says the Rambam, Zehepich HaTorah. This is the opposite of the Torah attitude. The Torah attitude is, if you see someone doing something wrong, you are morally obligated to say something. Don't keep your mouth closed. Don't ignore it. Don't say it's his problem. Don't say, I'm a nice guy. I'm the nice guy in the show. I'm the guy that everybody likes. I'm the guy that, is friends with everyone. Says the Rambam, there's no mitzvah to be the nice guy. There's no mitzvah to be the good guy. The mitzvah is, do what the Torah says. And the Torah says, if someone does something wrong, you got to say something. What about, how do you tell it to him? What do you say? What do you say? You see a guy, doing something wrong. So should you get up, in Times Square on a soapbox and start, announcing? Everyone should know that, Shmerel ben Beryl, back here in Torah Semes, let me tell you what he's really like. Is that what you should do? Says the Sefer HaChinuch. Look at number 21. It says the Sefer HaChinuch. On the top line in the left column, next column, V'zeh melamed. This teaches us. Shebetchilas hatoichacha sharoi la'adam lo'ichiach b'seisa. That at first, you need to rebuke someone privately. Uvelashon raka, softly. V'divrei nachas, gently. You pull the guy aside. You say, I really respect you. I learned so much from you. I really look up to you. Oh, if one day I could be like you. But I just wanted to tell you, there's one little thing that maybe I wanted to point out, maybe you could think about. What do you think? You tell them very nicely. Right? Kedei shelo yizvayish. So he's not embarrassed. But what if the guy says, get lost? Well, who do you think you are? You're telling me what to do. V'yein safek, there's no doubt. Shem leichazar b'ay b'kach. If the guy does not stop, shemachlimin hachoyte berabim. You got to publicly shame him. Umefarsim en cheta. You put up signs. This guy is a sinner. Umecharfenoisa. You embarrass him. Ad sheyaser l'mutam, until he repents. So if you ask the Sefer HaChinuch, is there ever a time to embarrass someone publicly? So yeah. But obviously first you have to do it privately. By the way, I just want to point out that the Rambam says that if a person violates bein adam lachaveroi, you can never embarrass him publicly. You embarrass him, you go over to him privately, you say, I'm shuldik mir, please, excuse me, please, maybe I could mention something to you, you could consider, you could think about, and if he does it again, you go over to him privately again, and if he does it 1,000 times, 1,000 times privately. There is never a time you can embarrass someone publicly, by bein adam lachaveroi. But if someone violates bein adam la'makom, then eventually, you're allowed to embarrass him publicly. So far, according to what we've learned, is there ever a time you could embarrass someone publicly immediately? No, of course not. Never. Eventually. And yet we find a very strange halacha. In Shulchan Aruch, in our Chaim in Kuf Chav Daled, Shulchan Aruch says like this. One is not allowed to talk during Chazar Sashatz. Yeah, it's a chiddush, right? You hear this new chiddush? You can't talk during Chazar Sashatz. By the way, it doesn't just mean Chazar Sashatz. It means Kaddish, Kedusha, Berchas Kriyashima, Psukei de Zimra, Kriyas HaTorah. What if you talk? If you talk, you're basically a good guy, it's just, you have a little problem? No. V'imsach hu chayte. If you talk, you're a sinner. Okay. How bad is a sin? It's only like murder. That's it. You're like Cain who killed his brother Hevel. That's it. What do we do to you? We scream at you. Oh, that's pretty strict, right? Now, if I were to ask you, does the Shulchan Aruch mean we scream at you eventually, or we scream at you right away? What would you say? Right away. He doesn't say eventually. He says we scream at you. If he meant eventually, he would have said, and if the guy keeps on talking every day for 3 weeks, then we start to scream at you. Doesn't say that. He says we scream at you right away. That's not what the Rambam said. That's not what the Chinuch says. The Chinuch says you got to do it gradually. And the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that there are certain instances where you could embarrass the guy right away. And in fact, if you look in the Shas of Tshuva Shevet HaLevi, from one of the Posei Adar, Rav Shmuel Levi Vazner, he says, you know what the Shulchan Aruch means? Shulchan Aruch doesn't mean you can embarrass him right away. The Shulchan Aruch agrees to the parameters of the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch that this is a gradual process. But is that what the Shulchan Aruch says? I don't think so. Shulchan Aruch says, you scream at the guy. Doesn't say eventually, it says immediately. So what we would like to explore is there ever a time that somebody could be doing an Aveira and there's no tolerance? You gotta reprimand him immediately. That's what we want to look at. So we come to a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says like this. There was a guy by the name of Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat was one of the all-time greatest Rishon, right? A man whose name lives on in infamy. Everybody knows Yeravam ben Nevat. Right? He's a Rasha, Marusha, the classic example, quintessential example of Chayte Umachte Farabim. And yet at the end of the day, he's the king. So what did he do right? He had to do something right. With all of his sins, he had to do something right. What did he do that was right? Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin Kafal from base number 23. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mibnei ma zacha Yeravam l'malchus. Why was Yeravam zochet to be the king? Mibnei shahichiach es Shlomo. You know why? Because one day he went to the biggest tzaddik in the generation, the most powerful person, the wisest man, Shlomo HaMelech, and he had the guts, the audacity, and he risked his life to say, Shlomo, I want to tell you something. You're doing something wrong. So the Gemara asks, if he's such a good guy, Yeravam, that he gave Musar to Shlomo, why was he punished? Says the Gemara, Mibnei shahichichai berabim, because he publicly reprimanded him. He publicly reprimanded him. So here we have this dichotomy. Yeravam was rewarded, why? Yeravam was rewarded because he gave Musar to Shlomo HaMelech. On the other hand, he was punished because he gave Musar publicly. Now it's very interesting. What was the Musar Yeravam gave to Shlomo? In the times of David HaMelech made holes in the walls of Yerushalayim so that people could come to the Oilei Regel. Until Shlomo came, he stuffed up the holes. Why did he stuff up the holes? Because Shlomo married a woman by the name of Bas Paro. Right? That must have been, some shidduch. He married the daughter of Paro, and the daughter of Paro would come out, like the Queen of England, and wave from her porch, and everybody would wave to her. And Shlomo HaMelech wanted everyone to come through one entrance and wave to the queen. So Yeravam ben Nevat said, but all these people, you're stopping them from being Oilei Regel. Fine. But Yeravam did it publicly. If I were to ask you, what did Yeravam do wrong? We would have said, what he did wrong was, he reprimanded Shlomo publicly, he should have done it privately. And that's what the Yad Ramah says in number 25. Mibnei ma nenash, mibnei shahichichai berabim. He reprimanded him publicly. And yet, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says ever so slightly different. Okay, you need to really have a very fine ear right now. Rashi says, you know why Yeravam was punished? Mibnei ma nenash. Why was Yeravam punished? Number 24. Shahichichai berabim. He reprimanded Shlomo publicly. Livaishai, in order to embarrass him. Says Rashi, what Yeravam did wrong was not that he reprimanded him publicly, is that his intention was to embarrass him by reprimanding him publicly. It sounds like, had Yeravam reprimanded him publicly, not trying to embarrass him, he would have been allowed to embarrass him and reprimand him publicly. You hear what Rashi's saying? Rashi says, why was Yeravam punished? Because he specifically reprimanded him in public in order to embarrass him. Which implies, if that wasn't his intention, if he just reprimanded him publicly, that would have been okay. So what we have over here is Rashi seems to be saying that there are times you're allowed to reprimand someone publicly immediately. When? So we come to something very interesting. Says the smak. Yeah? Number 28. The smak, not what you wear when you paint. Sefer Mitzvahs HaKatan. Sefer Mitzvahs HaKatan says like this. The whole discussion of when should you reprimand someone privately, that's when they sin privately. Says the smak, 2 lines from the end. Be'averos shebeseisar tzarich lo'ichichai beseisar. If someone sins privately, you got to rebuke them privately. Uvenachas. Be a Mr. Nice Guy, be a softy, be gentle. Kedei sheyikabel mimena, so the person will accept it. Oh, uba'averos shebagoloi. But what if a guy sins publicly? Tzarich lo'ichichai miyad. There's no tolerance. There's no patience. There's no waiting. Shaloi yischalel shem shamayim. Because if you're going to sit there with your mouth closed while this guy speaks Lashon Hara in front of 50 people, talks by davening in front of 50 people, eats something not proper in front of 50 people, if he's doing it in the privacy of his home, you be nice, you be gentle, you say, oh, I respect you so much, and you're such a nice guy, and this, blah, 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 and you butter him up, and then you give it to him, right? But if a guy who's sinning publicly, there's no tolerance. So you say, okay, that's the smak's opinion. Do we paskin like the smak? Magen Avram quotes the smak word for word. Taf Reish Ches, number 29. Aveira shebegolo yochichenu miyad. So you say that's the Magen Avram. Do we paskin like Magen Avram? Says the Mishnah Brura, halacha l'maisa. Aveira shebegolo yochichenu miyad. There you have it. And I even saw, that's Pshat in the Shulchan Aruch. When the Shulchan Aruch says that if someone is talking by davening, you gotta call him out. You know what? What do you mean? But you have to be patient and you have to be soft in the beginning. Yeah, that's if someone sins in the privacy of his home and nobody knows about it. But a guy standing in shul in front of 100 people and he's going to talk, you're going to keep your mouth closed? You can't do it. You're not allowed to do it. That's how the Mishnah Berurah paskins. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says if you see someone talk, go your in by. He doesn't mean after 2 years. He means right away. That's a simple meaning.
But you don't get an Avera?
No, you get a mitzvah. You got to tell him. You have to stand up. You got to, that's the Shalo Yischalo Shem Shamayim. That's a new gather. You don't want to desecrate the name of Hashem. Now, look, every dayan, every person in that position has to make the best estimate and the best decision of how to take care of the problem. But when the Shulchan Aruch says Goyar and Boy, we have a very simple way to explain that he means Kipshutai. Right away. Okay. Now it's very interesting that there seems to be a dissension of opinion about this. Again, we said, Rav Vosner said the Shulchan Aruch means eventually. Eventually. I'll tell you an amazing story. The Shalos Teshuvas Shar Ephraim. One day, he gets a letter in the mail from a rabbi by the name of Yosef. Very respected rabbi. Great speaker. Big Baal Darshan. He's packed. And the letter went like this. Rabbi Yosef writes to the Shiur He said, I want you to know, it was Shabbos HaGadol. And I got up to the podium, and I was in the middle of giving this wonderful drasha, and a guy has the chutzpah, he gets up in the middle of the drasha, he stands on the table, he said, you rabbi, you're an oisvarf, you're a rasha, you're a chaytei machdias harabim. What kind of drasha is this? What kind of yeshiva did you go to? Do you know anything? And he embarrassed me publicly. He said that what I was saying is apikarsos, and he ashamed me. And Rav Yosef writes to the Sha'ar Ephraim, what should I do? Should I put the guy in cherem? Should I lock him up in the closet? What should I do with this guy? So the Sha'ar Ephraim says, Ayveh, you wouldn't believe it. Because an hour ago I got a different letter. I got a letter from a guy who said that last Shabbos, he went to a Shabbos HaGadol drasha, and you wouldn't believe, Rabbi Sha'ar Ephraim, what the rabbi said at that Shabbos HaGadol drasha. What he said was ridiculous. It was apikarsos. It was shameful. And he goes on to write what the rabbi said. The rabbi said that when Hashem told Moshe, "B'hoitziacha es ha'am miMitzrayim tavdon es holakim al har hazeh," the rabbi said, it says, "Vayomer Hashem said, B'hoitziacha es ha'am miMitzrayim tavdon es holakim." Why does it start off Hashem and end Elokim? So you know what this rabbi made up? The rabbi said, Hashem told Moshe, B'hoitziacha es ha'am, when you take out the Erev Rav from Mitzrayim, Tavdon es Elokim, they're not going to serve me, they're going to serve Avodah Zarah, the Egel, al ha'har hazeh. And this guy writes, and I was there, and I couldn't take it. My, steam was coming out of my ears. This is a rabbi? He's spewing apikarsos. He's, drasha shel doifi. He's megala panim b'Torah shaloi ka'alach. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So the guy wrote, did I have a right to publicly shame him? So says the Sha'ar Ephraim, I could have never imagined that you, Rav Yosef, were the rabbi that said this ridiculous drasha. But now I know it was you. What are you talking about? What got into you? What kind of drasha was that? It's apikarsos. It's shameful that you could say such a thing. But you should know the guy had no right to embarrass you publicly. So it seems like it's machlokes over here. Because this Rabbi Yosef, when he gave his drasha, it was publicly. And he was sinning, bein adam la'makom. So somebody wanted to say, just because a rabbi speaks in front of 100 people, that's like private, because there's only one person listening. Right? No, but all kidding aside, probably there are at least two people, right? So, the rabbi was once giving a drasha, right? So he saw after the drasha, this guy's sleeping, so he turns to his friend and said, wake him up. So he said, no, you put him to sleep, you wake him up. Right? Okay. But in any event, so how do we paskin? Halacha l'maisa. The Sha'ar Ephraim seems to say that even when it comes to bein adam la'makom, you still can't embarrass someone publicly. The consensus of halacha is like the Magen Avram, the Smak, the Mishnah Berurah, that if somebody does an avera bein adam la'makom publicly, you can embarrass them publicly. Perhaps the case of the Sha'ar Ephraim is that even though this rabbi, his drasha was apikarsos, nobody knew. Nobody picked up exactly that you shouldn't have said that Elokim is the Egel. There's only one Chacham there who understood. So we can't say that what he was doing was sinning begoloi. It was not recognizable to everyone. But it comes out, halacha l'maisa, that there may be instances, I'm not telling you what to do, but there may be instances that a soft approach is not appropriate even in the beginning. So again, if you see someone doing an avera bein adam la'chaveroi, private. You can never say anything public. Bein adam la'makom, if he's sinning privately, private, that may be public. And then, if someone sins publicly, there may be a area in halacha where there could be a public protest. Okay. What we'd like to conclude with, Rabbi Isai, is that there's a very difficult Gemara in Erechim, number 33. Amar Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah. Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah said, T'mihani, I'm incredulous. I can't believe. If there's anyone alive today who knows how to give musar, come on, nobody knows how to give musar. You can go over to the guy, I don't like what you're doing. Yeah. Nobody knows how to give musar nowadays in the right way. That's what Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah said. And that is why, Rabbi Isai, we saw in number 3 in the beginning of the sheet, why we don't make a bracha on teichacha. The Avudraham says we don't make a bracha and teichacha because who says you're doing the mitzvah? There are people who don't know how to do it. It's questionable whether you're doing it. So does that mean, bottom line, that nowadays we don't have to give Musar, we don't have to give teichacha? We could say, you know what? I don't know how to do it. I'm not trained. I'm not sensitive enough. I'm not really, nobody. If Rabbi Glatstein ben Azariah is saying no one knew how to do it, then certainly today no one knows how to do it. And it almost seems like, there's very interesting, at the end of the Sefer Avos Chesed, there's a little compendium called Marganisa Tova. And it's an ethical work. And the Marganisa Tova says that we know the Torah says you can't hate anyone. How about Rishon? How about the wicked? So the Marganisa Tova says, technically speaking, you're allowed to hate Rishon. But in order for someone to be an established Rasha, you have to give him teichacha first. You have to give him Musar. You have to explain to him what he's doing wrong. And says the Marganisa Tova, nowadays nobody knows how to give Musar. So since no one knows how to give Musar, nowadays there's no such thing as Rishon. So if there's no such thing as Rishon, you can't hate anybody. So he's using this svara, halacha l'maisa, that nowadays nobody knows how to give Musar, and that's why you can't hate anybody. So does that mean, I'm in shul and I see someone next to me, talking, or I see someone doing something wrong, does that mean I'm exempt from the mitzvah? No. The poskim say no, don't make that mistake. Don't cop out of the mitzvah. You know what the Gemara means when the Gemara says, I'm doubtful whether anybody could do the mitzvah properly nowadays? What the Gemara means is like this. Even the Marganisa Tova himself, 5 lines earlier, says, I want to warn everyone that if they see somebody doing something wrong, they got to say something. What do you mean? He just said that nowadays nobody knows how to give Musar. The answer is very clear. The answer is very simple. Yeah, you see someone doing something wrong. Be aware that we're not really sure whether you're going to do a great job. You may not be sensitive enough. You may not engender enough ahava to the person, like we learned when Yaakov Avinu meets the shepherds. The first thing he says is, Achi. He's trying to do the mitzvah properly, with ahava, with humility, without any personal bias. It's a big question. Are you going to do the mitzvah properly? Be aware that this is a difficult mitzvah to fulfill. It's not like your lulav and esek, you just pick it up. It's very tenuous. It's very sensitive. It's not easy to fulfill. Ksav Sofer writes, first the Ksav Sofer says like this. Ksav Sofer says that, you're a rabbi, everyone loves you, you're very popular, yeah? You're the greatest rabbi in the world. Says the Ksav Sofer, you're a failure. You're a failure. If you're a rabbi that everybody likes, you're not doing the job. You're obviously not doing the job. Everyone likes you, sell used cars or something. But you want to be a rabbi, and everyone's like, no. You gotta sometimes, if you're going to be a rabbi, you gotta ruffle some feathers sometimes. You gotta say it as it is. But the Ksav Sofer says, I want you to know, the hardest mitzvah in the Torah to fulfill is teichacha. It's a very hard mitzvah to fulfill. So what the Gemara is saying is, since it's so hard, you don't have to do it. What the Gemara is saying is, beware, be careful. Because think about a few things. You're telling somebody not to do something, and how are you respective in that item? Are you careful in that item? When you tell him don't do it, could he turn back at you, or is he going to be thinking you have the same problem? So there are a lot of things that have to be taken into account. Whenever you give someone rebuke, you need to think, I got to be very, very careful. I might not be doing an adequate job. And that is why the Avudraham says, don't make a bracha, because you might not be doing the mitzvah. But the Avudraham says clearly, you got to do the mitzvah. He just says, don't make the bracha. Right? So this is an important thing to understand, to recognize. The Rambam says to have the attitude, live and let live. I don't have to say anything, mind your own business, I'll be Mr. Nice Guy. Rambam says that's hefech das Torah. That's antithetical to the Torah. You can't mind your own business. You can't be an ostrich. You live in this world, you see somebody listen to what Yaakov Avinu did. Listen to this. He sees shepherds. He doesn't know them from a hole in the world. A hole in the wall. What does he tell them? He doesn't say, you guys, you're a bunch of murderers. You guys, you're a bunch of criminals. You know what he says? You're working for your boss. It's not a break time yet. You're cutting corners on the boss's cheshbon. Yaakov Avinu, the normal guy says, why meddle into their business? No, Yaakov Avinu says, I see them doing something wrong, even minor, I have to say something. And the Gemara says further, you know what else Yaakov Avinu said? And even if you work for yourself, why are you being so lazy? You should be more industrious. I mean, who asked him? Why is Yaakov sticking his nose into it? No. Yaakov understands. He's trying to help the people. He's trying to set them right. He really felt love for the person. He wanted to give them a great gift. So on the one hand, it's a very difficult mitzvah. It's a very complicated mitzvah. It's a very sensitive mitzvah. But on the other hand, it's a mitzvah that should be done with ahava, should be thought of as a tzedakah, as a chesed, and as a corollary to the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Rabbi, have a wonderful night.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.